Members of council, staff, and members of the gallery, we call this policy and priorities meeting to start. And it's November 20th, and we call to order and adoption of the agenda. Any changes to the agenda? Can I maybe make a small suggestion? If all of you are willing, that 4.2, is that, I believe, the revised drain maintenance and building policy? Can we move that up first? We just switch it around? And have our guest present that first? All you agreeable? Or is it?
I think he's here for the building permit review report, which is first.
Oh, that is first. Sorry, I got the wrong report. All right, it's a senior's moment. Apologize. All right, so hearing none. Moved by Councillor Durley that the agenda for November 20th, 2017 regular meeting and policy priorities be adopted. Changes, anything? All in favor? Thank you. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof?
No, Mr. Chair.
Neither do I. All right, let's move on to number 4, new business, and we are item 4.1, building permit review report. That the committee received the community planning and development services report regarding the building permit fee review. And that committee recommend to council that the building permit fees be increased in accordance with the recommendations contained in the Town of Pelham Building Permit Fee Report prepared by Tonic Consulting Limited, and the staff prepare the appropriate building permit fee bylaw for council's consideration. This was moved by Councillor King. Mr. Tonic, you want to are you going to do a presentation? Or?
I am indeed.
Please step forward and.
Thank you very much to members of the committee and Mr. Mayor and the gallery. It's a pleasure to be back here once again to make a brief presentation, but I must say that Summerfest is a hard act to follow. But as somebody that's involved in festival planning elsewhere in the province, I mean, there's certainly an important part of your cultural heritage and your livelihood as a community, and it certainly bodes well if it helps put your community on the map. So congrats for what you've achieved. I did hear the word in the presentation, sustainability, in reference to Summerfest. And so I think the good news, I hope the good news, is that this report that I'm presenting tonight, I will be very brief, is about sustainability. Because what is being presented here, it really is a sustainable financial management plan for building permits, if you can use that particular buzz term. And it consists of basically 4 components. And the first component, and probably the most important, is a full cost recovery model, which is kind of a massaging, if you wish, of the report that was presented to you on June the 12th. Full cost recovery means that you will not be depending on your taxpayer at large to subsidize the cost of building inspection service in your municipality. So it's analogous to somebody that comes in with a subdivision proposal, signs a subdivision agreement, and pays for all of the services and so forth. So there's no cost to the taxpayer. And similarly, there shouldn't be any cost to the taxpayer because this is a user-pay system. So what's being suggested, recommended tonight, is a full cost recovery model. The second item is the cost stabilization reserve fund. So in the fees that you will levy, if you adopt this particular recommendation, part of those fees will be set aside in a cost stabilization reserve fund, and that helps you out in situations where your revenues from building permit fees don't meet your operational and capital costs related to providing the service. So there will be lean years, there often are in municipalities, and as you can see through the building permit activity, even in this municipality, you've had your ebbs and flows. So the cost stabilization reserve fund is a way of offsetting those lean years. The third item is that the fees are intended to cover both the direct costs, which is Mr. Zimmer's operation itself, and the indirect costs. That is to say, all of the municipal departments that support to Mr. Zimmer's operation. So you're not just looking at the building department alone, you're talking about possibly the purchase of a component of the computer for the finance department that whose responsibility is to prepare and administer the budget for the building permit process. And the fourth component of sustainability is CPI. As I've recently, in the last 5 years, I'd say, recommended to all the 60-odd municipalities I've done these studies for to adopt in their, or incorporate into their building bylaw CPI, so that it means that you can adjust the cost yearly, so that you're adjusting your building permit fees as you realize increases in costs over from year to year. Increases in salary costs, increases in operational or overhead costs, as the case may be. So there's the four essential components of a sustainable financial management plan for building fees. So I'm pleased to say that through the support and hard work of your staff in providing me with information and so forth, we're presenting a package to you. The process we went through, as you probably, just to refresh your memory, we looked at your building permit fees, we looked at your official plan development charges to look at projections on development in your community. We reviewed the direct costs and the indirect costs of every facet of the building inspection service, including the services provided by support departments. And then we came up with baseline fees, and we made some adjustments. One of the adjustments was to make permit fees for minor projects such as decks and things of that nature more affordable by cross subsidy from the larger permits, the single detached dwelling permits, things of that nature. And then another adjustment, of course, was the cost stabilization reserve fund surcharge, in this case of 20%, to make sure that you have that CSRF available for future expenditures. This year, just to give you an example on the cost stabilization reserve fund, I understand this year is a very good year. Issued permits for some 200 dwelling units, that's my understanding. So you're going to generate some surpluses, but at the same time, you're hiring outside staff to help with your building inspector to review plans and to carry out the inspections, which are the most important. So those are extra costs that were not built into your budget, so you can draw those costs from your cost stabilization reserve. So what is being presented then tonight then is the revised tables 5 and 6. And I think that you may have now table 6 in front of you, which gives you a comparison of what the proposed fees are in metric and imperial versus what they were 3 years ago, and they haven't been adjusted in the last 3 years. So in the table 6, the last column, which might be of interest to members of committee/council, are the percentage adjustments or changes, if you wish, from the current level of fees to what's being proposed. So just as an example, if you look at the line 3A for single-family dwellings, the proposed fee is $15.14 per cubic meter, up from $14.21 per cubic meter, which is an adjustment of about 6.5% over that previous fee, which is 3 years old. So with that, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee, I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Tonic. Members of committee? Councilor Ribbiak?
Just a comment with regard to the report that we have. My machine doesn't show any columns past the metric and imperial sign, and the third column or fourth column is missing from our report, so I didn't have a chance to review that before coming here. So,
Mr. Zimmer has
Mr. Zimmer, do you have those?
paper copy.
You got hard copies? Okay, that'd be
great,
helpful.
that's
Thank you.
good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, well, Councilor Ribbiak, you're looking at that. Mr. Mayor, and then Councilor Kersey as well?
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. One of the changes is multiple residential occupancy, and it looks like it's going more in line with single family. So single family is proposed at 1514, multiple is 1542, but it's a bit of an increase. Maybe can we hear from the presenter, why is that? Is that to keep it in line because of the work that's involved? How did he come up with that?
Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
increase?
Mr. Tonic?
two comments through you, Mr. Chair, to the mayor. Two comments. One is we have endeavored in every circumstance to relate the fee to the actual work involved. So it's a workload-driven number. So it takes X number of hours to review the plans. It takes X number of hours to do the inspections. It takes X number of hours for the administration related to the process, the complete process. So in some we've depended substantively on the experience of your CPO to give us an indication of what the work volume is involved. So we calculated the number of hours for each of the various phases of the process, and that's the end result. The second comment I would make in response to your question, and it's not with respect to that particular fee, but further down you'll see a number of items that are essentially the same fee. What we're trying to do there is also simplify the administration of the bylaw so that there's not a lot of calculations that have to be done by staff. Means higher levels of productivity for services that are relatively similar in nature. So the effort of the level of effort required is comparable. So we've left the fee at or developed a series of fees that are identical.
Okay, thank you. And that makes a lot of sense. So to another category, the new farm buildings and additions to farm buildings, so they seem to be more in line with, at least the new farm buildings seem to be more in line with the assembly occupational number, and the additions roughly half of that. New farm buildings are really a third of what it is for a single family or multiple or residential, et cetera, and significantly less than, industrial, et cetera. So there are some changes there. I don't know if there's any comment from Mr. Tunick on those new farm and why the additions are quite different
Two comments,
suggestion than new farm.
Through the chair, again, to the mayor, two comments that I would make is, one is there's certainly a degree of complexity in the review of building plans for farm buildings, but in part the intent is to, the second comment I guess is to encourage that kind of development in your community, in the rural area of your community. And it's, agriculture is a very, very significant part of the legacy of this community, as we know. And we're trying to encourage the farm industry to move forward with expansions if necessary, hence the relatively low cost for expansions.
Okay, that's great to hear, because I think that's, in line with what council would want as well. The final question is regarding the permit renewal. That's a new category. I don't know if Mr. Tunick can speak to that or Mr. Zimmer. When I have another one too, but anyways, the permit renewal fee.
Again, through the chair to the mayor, this kind of a process gives this council opportunity to introduce new fees where there is a service that is being provided, where there is no user pay or user fee. And so again, with the idea of being full cost recovery for the complete service, then we're recommending some fees be added. Another one that's being added is item H towards the bottom of the schedule, the alternative solution review. On occasion, somebody will come in with an innovative type of building process or different materials or so forth that aren't necessarily covered by the building code. Well, the legislation gives Mr. Zimmer the authority to review that different type of technical approach, if you wish, to building or the use of materials. So he can do that kind of a review. So there's obviously a time involved to do that. So we've introduced that particular fee as well to, again, ensure that there's full cost recovery for providing that service.
Okay, that's great to hear, and I think the the permit renewal fee, I think that's something that we've talked about before, that sometimes people get a permit, it's not closed, and you want it to be closed and safe and all of that, so that'll be an annual renewal, and that's the trigger, so. Thank you. I'll cede the floor, Mr. Chair, and see what colleagues.
Thank you, Mr.
think.
Mayor.
Thank you.
Councillor Kersey, and then,
I'm good.
go ahead, Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Tunnick, I fully support your recommendation of the CSRF, Cost Stabilization Reserve Fund. I think that's something very important going forward. It helps to sustain the building department so that we're not hiring and laying off, and we get a good crew, we keep the crew and keep everybody moving forward. Your recommendation does not, it speaks about the level of surcharge, but it does not speak to a level to which we should take that fund. Some municipalities take it to 40% of the operational costs, some to 60, some full. At some point in time, we may even exceed if we continue along that line and we're having substantive growth, we may exceed the full operational costs of that department. So how would you view dealing with that?
I guess with the greatest respect to my former employer many moons ago, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Buildings branch that I worked for, the legislation is weak when it comes to that very issue. It provides the enabling authority for a municipality to establish such a fund, but doesn't set any sort of criteria down as to whether you should review it when you've achieved a certain level, $500,000, million, or $2 million, or so forth. It's weak in that sense. But it does give discretion, which I think this council, like other councils in Ontario, would want. And what I would suggest to you is through your building department, you monitor, okay, the accumulation of that fund, you see. So that if it does get to the point that it sounds like it's an extraordinary amount of money, because you can't use it for anything else but the building
Right.
service, okay? Then you may wish to look at the review of your building permit fees, and maybe you could reduce them or give a, amnesty for fees for a period of time or something like that. But I would caution council, because there's only so much land in this municipality, and once you run out of land to develop, your revenues are not going to meet your operational costs, you see. So be very, very careful. I would say, at a very minimum, let the fee accumulate for 5 years, see where you stand after 5 years. And if it, again, is an extraordinary amount, and you think there should be some reprieve to the development industry, then you can do it. And council can certainly do it at any time. But I'm thinking ahead, as your planner is thinking ahead, is what are the
coming.
projected growth figures for this municipality 10 years from now, 15 years from now. And we know growth will end at some point, you see. So what happens? You still will have a demand for your building inspection service, because all that existing building stock is going to be repairs, retrofits, and that sort of stuff. So there's going to be continuation, but your revenues may not meet your operational costs at that point. So that's my advice to you.
Councillor
As a
Kersey.
follow-up, Mr. Chair, so what's the, Mr. Tunnick, if you're able to comment, is there a common practice across Ontario? You've done 60-odd of these studies whereby the receiving council will develop a policy which would stipulate some of the things that you've outlined here, such that, a new council coming in would have a policy that, and our senior staff would have a policy to sort of go forward on, and certain triggers built into that policy which would precipitate a review.
Yeah. I have made the recommendation verbally to quite a number of municipalities that have raised that question, but I will be honest with you that I'm not aware that any single municipality has developed a particular policy. And it's actually quite amazing. We're talking about a 20% surcharge here in Mississauga. It's 200%. And, so there's dramatic variations in what municipalities do, but I'll be honest with you, I'm not aware of a municipality that's actually developed policy. It's not to say that we couldn't do it for your municipality and say, as in moving forward or bring forward at some point in the future, here's what we should think about. But yeah, I would be certainly pleased to work with your staff if you wish to develop a specific policy to assist for future councils.
Great, I think policy adds strength going forward. That's a comment, Mr. Chair. I have another question regarding the cost recovery. I'm not sure whether our presenter could address it or whether our treasurer might want to address it. And while we are looking at full cost recovery, the profit centers that will come up, not profit, but revenue centers that will result out of that will be both the direct revenue going to the building department and accrued to the building department, and the indirect that would go to all the other departments that are involved in the process and administering. Will we be undertaking financial monitoring and reporting on those direct and indirect costs, or will all the costs go to the income center of the building department? So I don't know who would like to tackle that.
Madam Treasurer or
Yeah.
Madam Planner?
Mr. Chair, through you, currently, right now, we do have a line item in the budget that does take some of the indirect costs out and move them into the general revenue for the town.
Okay, thank you. I think that's important for the departments that are contributing to the building permit to have recognition of their revenue side as well.
That it goes to their site-specific
Right.
accounting purpose. Okay. Thank you very much. Any other comments, members of council? Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Maybe maximum of two other things, Mr. Chair. I apologize. Just the first is the recommendation that's here is that the consumer price index be annual adjustment. Is that to be written in the bylaw itself? Just the mechanism for that?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
again, through the chair, we incorporated a clause into the building bylaw to allow that to happen.
All right, great. That's good. I didn't see it in the bylaw, so we'll make sure that it's there. And then the other is sort of the next step. So it sounds like we then have to call a public meeting.
No, you've had the public meeting, sir.
Oh.
It was on the 12th of June.
Okay, so that was the public meeting. Okay, there were some changes to that, so I thought maybe we had to call another one. Okay. So what's being proposed in terms of the timing of the establishment of the fees? Is it when council approves it? Is it the start of the calendar year? What are staff recommending in that regard?
Madam Director?
Mr. Chair, through you, we would be bringing the bylaw to council at the next council meeting, but the recommendation would be that the new fees start January 1st, consistent with updating all the user fees.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments, changes? That being said, all in favor? Carried. Oh, pardon me, excuse me.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I didn't realize that you were calling the question. I wanted to propose an amendment.
Go right ahead, we'll hold on.
Mr. Chair, in light of the discussion with Mr. Tunick regarding the policy surrounding the establishment and administration of the CSRF, I'd like to add that we direct staff to work with Mr. Tunick in the development of a policy for presentation to council for consideration.
So thank you, Counselor, we'll take that as staff direction,
Thank you.
if you're all, Madam Director?
That's fine.
Okay, so we'll take Mr. Mayor, do you want to speak?
Just regarding inflation, can we just make sure that maybe it's in there? It is a recommendation, but I didn't see it in the bylaw.
They're
as
gonna
I-
refine that.
So if they can just
Madam
look at that.
Director?
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you, we'll certainly ensure that that is included in the bylaw when it comes to you
Okay.
in 2 weeks' time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So we should be here for December the 4th?
Yes.
Thank you so much. All right, I kind of jumped the gun, but any further comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Oh, Mr. Tunick?
Mr. Mayor, it's item 15.1 on page 37 of my report. It reads, immediately upon release of the Consumer Price Index by Statistics Canada, all services fees set out in Schedule A shall be adjusted by the Consumer Price Index and shall be
Perfect.
rounded to the nearest cent, so forth. So it's item 15 item 15 of the bylaw.
For inflation and CPI, but not consumer price index. That's great. Thank you.
Thank Okay, that's why you're the pro, Mr. Tonic. That's what I like.
Perfect.
All right, any further comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Mr. Tonic.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Next report, 4.2, revised municipal drain maintenance and building policy. And it's moved by Councilor Ribbiak that the Policy and Priorities Committee receive this community planning and development report, that the committee recommend the council amend the municipal drain maintenance and building policy S302-02 by deleting paragraph 7 and replacing it with, quote-unquote, if a benefiting property owner's share of the maintenance and repair cost is $10 or less, the amount will be assumed by the town. Comments or questions? Councilor Ribbiak.
Thank you. Just for clarification, the last time we looked at this and whatever amount was set, and I can't remember what it was, maybe it was $5. Was it 10 in the past as well? Why are we
Madam
replacing it if
Director.
it's the same?
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you, the current policy indicates that if it's $10 or less, it would be added to the tax roll. And we're proposing to delete that and change it to if it's $10 or less, that it would be assumed by the town.
Councilor Ribbiak?
What I was saying, I guess, was the last time we looked at this, we were doing that because the cost of the administration was greater than the cost of the actual assumption of the benefited amount. Is that still the case? Is that why we're discharging it all together? Because the cost of putting it onto the tax roll is too great?
Madam Treasurer or the planner, or either one, or both?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if you look at the report here, for example, the Keene drain, the total value of the charges less than $10 is $1,434, but we would have to issue 295 charges to the tax bill. It's a lot of work administratively to collect that. And so the Disher drain, for instance, has 247 bills would have to be issued for $388. And the cost of the administration is much higher than that.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Anybody else? Anything else? All right, hearing no other comments or questions, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moved by Councilor Kersey. Agenda 4.3, municipal grant policy update. Be it resolved that the Policy and Priorities Committee received the November 20th, 2017 municipal grant policy update and recommend that council approve the municipal grant policy presented therein at the next regular meeting and December the 4th, 2017. Comments or questions? Councilor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions through you. I need to get some clarity around what these grants can be utilized for. They can't, it states that they can't be used for operational expenses, but does that exclude their use for capital purchases? Or can they only be used for, it talks about significant events of benefit to the community. So, for example, we get requests for purchase of, let's say, a kitchen item. And that's a capital expense in nature, but not part of a significant event. It might be part of the normal operation of the organization. So how does that fall down within the confines of this particular policy that's been brought forward?
Who wants to answer that? Madam Director, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's two different sections. The first is for waiving of municipal facilities,
Right.
and also in-kind services. So if they request staffing or whatever, that is under the first section, which is the $20,000.
Right.
Okay, the second section is $40,000 this year, and that's because we are taking into consideration the $20,000 that we had a multi-year commitment previously. So Since that commitment is over with, it's back in the policy for the 40,000, so we can keep track of the full amount.
Okay.
And that is at the discretion of council. When a request does come in, there will be a report to council just identifying any, any ways that the request would affect our operation internally. So if they are requesting staffing or any particular item that would affect us, our operation, a report will be coming with the request. Other than that, it is up to council's discretion how they spend, how you wish to spend 40,000. Yeah.
Councillor Kersey?
So, Madam Director, for absolute clarity, the key facts that you have listed here do not apply to the $40,000 that is at council discretion.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
As a further follow-up, Mr. Chair.
By all means.
So there is no limit for any request for council discretionary funding.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. That $40,000 is at council's discretion.
I see.
In the past,
You had limits and,
one foundation, we donated $20,000 per year on a multiple year
right,
for a specific project.
Right.
That is council's discretion,
I
how
see.
you spend that money.
Okay, Madam Treasurer, please.
Yeah, and just to answer the first question, through you, Mr. Chair, the 20,000 for the one foundation was capital. So when you asked the question, could it be a capital item? That was equipment for the hospital.
right,
Yes. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. There's been actually a lot of questions from the service club and charitable sector on this. And now this is the third kind of change, I guess, in as many years. I don't know if we need an infographic or something like in the other report, but I just want to be clear, the first application-based process is in kind. 4,000 per group, up to 4,000 per group, and it's a maximum of $20,000 per calendar year. Is that correct?
Madam Director?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it is.
Okay. Then the next portion is sort of a, maybe come up with another word for it, but
Cash.
sort of a request-based, and it's correspondence, it's anything else that kind of comes up through the year, but that it also talks about cash or in kind. So that can be both.
Through you,
Madam Director?
Mr. Chair, yes, it could, depending on the request. If it's a nonprofit organization that requires cash for a certain project or a capital or so forth, but also they need assistance with whatever project it is, you would receive a report from staff indicating the ramifications on that department, and you would make your decision at that point.
Cost it out.
Okay. Okay. There was a lot of questions about it in the community as it went through, because before it was a 20 and a 20, and now it's a 20 and a 40. Okay, thank you. That makes it clear. Thanks.
Councillor Kersey?
One last question. So, if the One Foundation made a presentation to us recently, any contribution that we chose to make to One Foundation would come out of our $40,000 discretionary fund. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is that correct, Madam Treasurer?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Just on that same note, if I may, So if it's a multi-year contribution, then that would also be at the discretion of council, because when we did it, it was over a period of 5 years. Or is this just each year they have to reapply? So let's say the one
Yes.
foundation, would they have to apply every single year?
No, so what happened in the past, Mr. Chair, is that once the commitment was made for 5 years, it came off the top.
Came off the top?
So you had
Okay.
40,000, and then the 20,000 came off the top, and then you only had 20,000 in year.
Left, okay, all right, I'm clear. Councilor Rivia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, for clarity, because I'm not entirely certain. The solution statement indicates that the grant application process will be open from September 1st to September 30th. And obviously, that's so that we can be ready for consideration during the budgeting process. But we're also told that the $40,000 that is at the discretion of council, I'm assuming can happen any time through the course of the year. So I'm just wondering if that's the case, it shouldn't also be noted within the solution statement as well as changes to key facts with regard to the nature of this 40,000.
Madam Treasurer?
I don't
Yep.
know how we would change that.
Councilor
Just-
Rivia?
Yeah, can you just get more clarification?
Sure. The solution statement indicates the grant application process is open from September 1st to September 30th. And I think that we've been in the habit of receiving applications for the $20,000 fund, and it's been looked at by a committee, and it's been included within the budget for the year. And I suppose people might have put forward requests, applications for part of the 40,000 during the September 1st to September 30th period. But we're also being told that we have complete discretion over this. So if an event occurred sometime through the course of the year and people wanted us to support that and we felt it was right to do it, and the 40,000 was, or some part of it was still available, I'm assuming we have
Yes.
the right within our discretion to do that. So my question is whether the solution statement might be modified for our council meeting when we approve this to make that distinction in some way. I don't know what words to use, but
Right.
but I think it might be useful for people to know that they are not limited to September 1st to September 30th for council's use of their discretionary budget.
Councilor Kersey?
Just as an example,
To that
Mr.
point?
Chair, 9.4.1, the request from the Royal Canadian Army Cats
Yep.
came after the application,
Yeah.
so it would fall within our $40,000 discretionary fund.
Right.
And staff would have to bring forward a report to us, right, to cost it out.
Madam Director, further clarification?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that actual application should be out of the 20,000 because we're waiving fees. It slipped through. I apologize.
Okay, I'll have Councilor Durley for the first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It does state under the council receive application up to 40,000 maximum for a calendar year, the first bullet. Delegations correspondence can be submitted to council throughout the calendar year, even after the application-based deadline is passed. So I think that's covered.
If you, Mr. Mayor, you,
I would just, I think councilors, Mr. Chair, have said it's a discretionary amount, it's a discretionary, it really is regarding a municipal grant.
Right.
And so, I would want to have some sort of, perhaps more rigor or more policy on that second the $40,000. Again, so it's clear that it's for these goals. So Councillor Kersey asked at the beginning, do any of the key facts at the start? I think some of them do. Some of them do apply to the second amount. I mean, the purpose of this is it's to assist service clubs, charities, those kind of things, to do the good work that they do, to ensure that our community maintains its and enhances its small town feel. So I wouldn't want to give any impression otherwise. I don't think council's saying that, but I just saying the words discretionary amount, it's within the policy of the municipal grant policy. So I just want to make sure that we continue to focus on that.
Okay.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else further? Sorry, suggesting under the 40,000 there be a very certain set of prerequisites? Or just the way it's worded leaves it flexible?
Well,
It's
thank you,
in
Mr.
the-
Chair. I think it's,
statement.
so we look at the key facts, not-for-profit organizations that implement significant events within the town are eligible to apply. You know, what's the goal, the overall goal of this, right? And I think it speaks to it in the key facts. And what is it that we're trying to help with? So I recall a few years ago, we supported some kitchen equipment at the Legion.
Yes.
Well, the Legion does that. It's a community space. They often hold town events. They hold, like, actually for the town itself, but they also hold so many other events in the community that helping with that venue really increases our small town feel. So, you know, someone could pick up on this and say, oh, it's a discretionary account. Well, it's not. It's for a bigger goal. It's for helping those in the community that are volunteering. It's for special events. It's for bringing our community closer together. So I don't know if the wording needs to be tightened up. I didn't bring my fine-tooth comb this evening, Mr. Chair. You'd be glad to know. But I just, as we talk about it and as we think about it, if somehow we can continue to focus on the rationale, I think it's important. Thank you.
Councillor Gurley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think in the key facts, to me, it's perfectly clear. Nonprofit organizations located in the town of Pelham, if you're a member of a nonprofit organization, normally the goals of that organization is to promote the town and events within the town. So, like, I look at this report and there's no confusion in my mind of what actually we're trying to do.
Folks, do we need resmithing, or do we think we got enough in there to, I mean, you could refine it to a point of become, I could say, immobilized. I've seen that as being part of a nonprofit for years on the other side. Councillor Ribbiak.
Yeah, to answer your question, I think that all of the concepts that we've been talking about are in here.
Okay.
The problem is that there are some internal inconsistencies within the report. For example, Mr. Mayor has talked about what the purpose is. Well, the how might we statement really covers that. The fact that in the description of key facts around the 40,000, it indicates that we can do it all year round, but in the solution statement, it restricts it. So I think all that needs to happen is that somebody needs to kind of go over it critically and remove internal inconsistencies like that. I think all the concepts are there.
So, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Maybe something like under, my fine-tooth comb is coming out here, but where it says council will have full discretion of the approved funding amount, maybe linking it back to that how might we statement, you know, within the confines of, or within the goal in the how might we statement, or something like that, just so that it's just not, like, it's grounded.
Okay.
So maybe we direct staff to kind of come up with appropriate language and present it to council.
Maybe the easiest, the simplest is redirect staff to come up with some more clarifying sort of wording on it and direction so that it makes it understandable not only to us internally but to external groups applying. Does that sound fair?
Yep.
All right, so
But I think that can happen between now and council, so
well,
I
that's
don't
what
want
I'm
to hold
getting
it up.
at, yeah. So instead of deferring the report, bringing it back, let's
Yeah.
just give direction if council's good with that. And then it'll come back for our December 4th report. That sound, council report? That sound good? Okay, any further comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Great discussion. Okay, moved by Councillor Kersey, item 4.4, the election policy use of corporate resources for election purposes. That the Policy and Priorities Committee receive the report, Election Policy, Use of Corporate Resources for Election Purposes for Information, and that the Policy and Priorities Committee recommend the Council approve the policy appended thereto to repeal and replace policy S201-11, effective upon Council approval December 4th, 2017. Comments or questions?
Oh, very clear.
It's clear.
I think it is too. It's pretty,
Yeah.
all right. Hearing no other, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. All right, moved by Councillor King, item 4.5, that the 2017 vacancy on Pelham Council Ward 1 report be received, and that the Policy and Priorities Committee recommend option 1A to council to adoption of the regular meeting scheduled for Monday, December 4th, 2017, and that the vacant Ward 1 seat on council for the town of Pelham be filled by appointing a person who has consented to accept the office in accordance with Section 2631A of the Municipal Act 2001 to hold the position of councillor, Ward 1, for the remainder of the term of this council, and that council appoint James Lane as councillor Ward 1 for the remainder of the 2014-2018 term. Comments or questions? Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would certainly support this recommendation for a number of reasons. I guess the first is that we've already established a precedent and a principle with regard to vacancies that occur on council this late in the term. So I see no reason why we wouldn't stick with that principle. As a practical matter, there's so little left in the term that probably a good portion of it would be dedicated to the campaigning portion as opposed to the working portion, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I suppose the cost of it is something to consider as well, though frankly I think the cost is the least important reason for going this route. I think the most important thing is that we are able to fill the vacancy and continue with our work for the remainder of the term, what little of it there is left to go through. Those are my reasons, and I'd be happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Firstly, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our clerk for providing us with a very detailed report outlining our options and the implications of each of those options, the timelines, et cetera. So thank you, Madam Clerk, for providing that to us. Secondly, Mr. Chair, I'm more than pleased to support the motion appointing James Lane as councillor. He is, as you know, a seasoned councillor. We have worked with him in the past. He has taken great interest in our community over the years and followed the trials and tribulations of council, and would certainly be pleased to have him seated next to me and as we go forward with our agenda.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Durley and then Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The experience and the knowledge of Ward 1 that Mr. Lane can bring forward through his past involvement with council and his continued interest in council certainly convinced me that the orientation period that would be necessary to bring someone on board is actually nothing, because he can step right into the position. So I support this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Durley. Councillor King.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I also will be in support of this motion for all of the reasons that have already been stated. But additionally, James Lane has been, excuse me, has previously contributed to the strategic plan, which is the business plan that we're working forward on. And when I give that some thought with regards to the orientation period for someone else at this point in the term, I think that James Lane has quite a lot to contribute this year because of his previous involvement in the growth and direction that the town is taking. So I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo the comments of colleagues, both from a general nature and also in the specific nature. So from a general nature, does it make sense to have a by-election? It did a few years ago when it was at the beginning of the term. Now at this point, it would be well into next year before that by-election result would be known, and it's important to have a representative in this vacant seat for residents. Another option I think that the clerk has outlined is what some other, I think another local council did recently, and that was an interview process, and some councils have talked about that in the past. We actually had considered that back in 2011, and we heard loud and strong from the community that they, at that point, didn't want to have that option. An interview process where people, applicants would come forward, they could be interviewed, and then there could be, a process out of that. So the most democratic is a by-election, but for logistical purposes at this point in the term, it doesn't make sense. The next is going then to the next person on the list, and colleagues have, so that's in general, so then specific colleagues have spoken about Mr. Lane and his years of service around the council table, and he is experienced, he's knowledgeable, and he is also, as I think I said at a previous time, he's a different voice. So, and diversity around the council table is extremely important. And I know he did bring that in previous terms, and I look forward to him bringing that this term as well, should council approve this at future meetings. So it's important to have a diversity of voices at this council, and each of us around the table currently brings our own nuances and gifts and talents. And I think Mr. Lane will add to that and complement those talents very well and round us out. So for all those reasons, I'm supportive as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too will add my support to this. Serving on council is extremely difficult and complicated, but at the same time very rewarding. We welcome back Councillor Lane if it's approved. We also extend the understanding to others that have served in this capacity. This is not something that you take lightly, and we are looking forward that in spite of some of the challenges we have ahead of us, I know that we will overcome them and that we will move forward in satisfying and understanding how this community has grown. For some of us who have been here for almost a decade and a half, it's amazing. I just talked to one of our former councillors the other night from 13 years ago, and we were just mind-boggled as to what has happened. So we will get through all the areas of diversity, and we will disagree with each other, and we look forward to having Councillor Lane join us again following Council's approval on December 4th. With that, any other further questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. All right. Moved by Councillor Ribbiak and seconded by, no second, that the regular meeting, the Policy Priorities Committee be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for December 4th, 2017, following council. All in favor? And with that, ladies and gentlemen, and members of council, we are adjourned.